I'm Donovan Snell from Lutron Electronics. In this video series, I'm going to take you through the steps to activate your new RadioRA 3 system from the initial discovery of your RadioRA 3 processors to the final full transfer after you've activated devices. In this first video, I'm going to focus on four main steps: the discovery and activation of your RadioRA 3 processors, the initial database transfer to those processors, wireless repeater activation, and the full transfer to your processors and repeaters. Let's get started. So you've completed your initial system setup in Lutron Designer, and it's time to begin system startup. The first step in the process is to activate your RadioRA 3 processor. With the appropriate project file open, navigate to the Activate tab and make sure Processors is selected in the drop-down menu. Now, review processor communication settings. The default settings are recommended for RadioRA 3. For maximum communication resilience and network serviceability, DHCP is recommended for RadioRA 3 processors. If a specific IP address is desired, Lutron recommends assigning MAC-based IP reservations with the DHCP host. When you navigate to the Activate Processor screen, processor discovery will begin automatically on your network. And by now, you will probably see that one or more processors are displayed on the left-hand side of the screen. At the top of the page, there is a button to stop or start discovery. Below, you should see the information for any RadioRA 3 processors found on the network. Lutron Designer uses MDNS protocol to find any RadioRA 3 processors on your network. Depending on your system or setup, you may discover more than one processor. To help identify the correct processor to activate, you have two simple options. Option 1 is to verify the MAC address or serial number on the device that you intend to activate. Check these against what you see in the panel on the left. Option 2 is to select a processor from the discovery pane and click Identify Selected Processor. This will make the light on that processor blink to confirm that it's the correct processor. If the processor that you need to activate has not been discovered at this point, there are a few steps I'd recommend starting with. First, verify that the processor is wired to the correct network and that it is powered. You should see a light periodically blinking on the front of the processor. Next, verify your laptop network settings. Make sure that you're connected to the correct network and that you're not plugged into more than one network at a time. Finally, check your firewall settings and temporarily turn off any active VPNs. This may be harming the discovery and activation process. If you've made any changes throughout this, stop and restart discovery, and you should see your processor now. Once you've verified the processor, click the Activate button for that processor at the far right of the screen. Verify and activate each RadioRA 3 processor in your system one by one until they've all been activated. Now, we'll move on to our first system transfer. To start the initial system transfer, head over to the Transfer tab. For the first transfer to a RadioRA 3 system, Lutron Designer will always send over the full system programming file. But this is a good time to look at the Force Full Transfer option under Advanced Options. By default, Lutron Designer does not force a full programming transfer to all devices in the system every time. Instead, only transferring programming data to devices that have had their programming recently modified. During routine programming changes, such as scene adjustments, it is not necessary to force a full transfer. In fact, a full transfer is likely to take significantly longer than a normal transfer. For this reason, a full transfer is only recommended if system devices do not seem to behave as expected after a programming change. You might be thinking, how will I know if my processor's firmware needs to be updated? Don't worry about that. Lutron Designer will automatically check for this and will prompt you to update the processor's firmware as part of the programming transfer. Once the initial transfer has been started, you can expect it to take about 5 to 10 minutes for processor firmware upgrade. And another 10 to 15 minutes, depending on the size of the database, for the programming transfer. Don't be alarmed at the end of the transfer when you have a bunch of warnings pop up. At this stage, we expect to see a device not addressed warning for each of our system devices. The next step in the activation process is to activate any wireless repeaters or auxiliary repeaters that you might have for ClearConnect Type A coverage. Go over to the Activate tab and then select Devices from the drop-down menu. Click on Start Activation then select your wireless or auxiliary repeaters from the device list and follow the instructions for repeater activation. Once all repeaters have been activated, exit activation and conduct another transfer as before. Now that the processors and repeaters have been both activated and transferred to, it's time to move on to activating our other system devices. To continue, look for the next two videos on activating devices from the Lutron app and activating devices from the Lutron Designer software. Thank you for joining me, and stay tuned for more from Lutron.